Hi, Monika.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Among our projects, we do this debate series on actual and urgent themes. Every debate has its own topic, and today's topic is going to be literature.
Hi, I'm Virginia. I'm just a big reader, so I'm joining this conversation as a reader. And recently I've started working on a project that should be a novel, but I'm not sure what it is yet. So it's kind of a interesting experience to have during this quarantine.
Hi, I'm Monika. I am a writer, a PhD student, and I also translate from Polish. And that's my cat meowing, sorry. I'm teaching my students at Brooklyn College via Zoom and posting video lectures and new things like that for my literature class. And I also started a book club to get together over the weekend.
And I'm ERIK DURON. I am a co-owner of Left Bank Books in New York City. We're a small specialty used and rare bookshop in Greenwich Village. We sell first editions and collectible editions, used, vintage, and rare books. We're particularly interested in the book as object and as a vehicle for communicating both literary and visual culture. So the marriage of text and imagery, whether that's photographs or reproductions of artwork, but also the layout and design of a book and the typography and how that speaks to the particular period in which it was created or produced.
You are in New York, right now?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn. Monika, are you in Brooklyn or are you in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn.
Virginia, where are you?
I'm in Torino, north of Italy. Yeah, I lived in Australia for 7 years. I moved there after school and then I came back 2 years ago. Yeah, almost 2 years ago.
Wow.
She's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a mate.
She introduced me to reading a lot because I used to not read so much because of timing or because of just like, I don't know, maybe it's not for me for this moment of my life. I used to read a lot when I was younger and now I kind of stopped. Still kind of reading again, thanks to Giorgia. Not as much as she does. Like recently she was reading, what was the name of the book that
The Age of Surveillance Capitalism?
Yeah, but it applies so much to what are we in today. And all the practice of data collecting and so on, which is quite scary because I don't know if in Brooklyn is the same, but here in Italy we have an app to trace people like in China.
Oh, really?
People who are... Yeah. And it's called Immunity App, which is very weird.
Maybe such an act exists. I don't know, Monika, if you know, but it's not in, if it does, it's not in widespread use. I mean, the big problem here now, and is going to be for a while, is testing and tracing, and that is for tracing. But, you know, we have such a strong culture of privacy and individual freedom that I don't see a way that is going to be put into widespread use. I think there'd be a lot of resistance to it here.
I'm reading the news from coming from America. Every day is quite intense and politically it's overwhelming too.
At any rate, we're closed and we have been for over a month, and we've transitioned our business to online selling. We always had a website, but it was never very active, but we're doing a lot more to promote it. And then also a good part of our inventory remains at the store. So I go into the store, I ride the subway, I wear a face mask and carry hand sanitizer and go into the store, open up, go inside, visit my shop and pack up whatever books are there and take them to the post office. And, you know, we get maybe a dozen to 20 orders per email out of, 1,500 recipients. So that's what it boils down to.
Where in New York is the store?
So it's downtown. It's in Greenwich Village. It's this old historic neighborhood downtown that, has a history and a tradition of a creative community But now it's a very, going back to the earliest days, but a lot of great poets lived there, and a lot of great artists lived there. Marianne Moore lived there, and Sinclair Lewis lived there, and everybody lived there, and the Beat Generation hung out there.
So the first question of ERIK is to talk about what you guys are currently reading.
Well, at the moment, I'm reading American Pastoral by Philip Roth, and it's my second book by him because I'd never heard of him before, and it's hypnotizing. At the moment, I can't do anything but reading this book. Especially, I think I try to read it as me not being Italian, because as an Italian, it's sort of deconstruct the image that I had about America growing up.
You read it, Monika?
I have not read that Philip Roth novel. I read, I think his first novel. What is that called?
First book, Goodbye Columbus.
Yes, Goodbye Columbus. Yeah. I read Goodbye Columbus and I really loved it. And I totally see what you mean about just kind of this like iconic like Americana, like that's like takes place over like a summer vacation, I think.
Virginia, I was curious what was shocking about it to you?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the fact that, because the story is mainly about this man who is the great American man who then has this daughter who is a rebel and anarchist. I didn't realize that was something that was present in the literature, in American literature. Like my whole experience in American literature was all this, it was either this algid, distant prose.
It takes place in the 1960s or later?
Yeah, in the 1960s, yeah. But it sort of goes from 1940s. But I had read Goodbye Columbus before this. So that's the only other book that
Did you like
read.
that one?
Yeah, I really liked it. It was really funny.
I think, yeah, it's really funny. And I think I don't remember a lot of it because I read it in college, but I remember the mood of it very clearly. And I remember I was reading it like doing something also very pastoral, like laying in some kind of like grassy lawn or something. So I remember that really clearly.
Lately, I'm also a lot into physics book, which sounds boring, but not like physics, like formulas, like the whole invisible side of the world, and like how there are these groups of physics at CERN in CERN in Geneva, I think is, that are trying to photograph energy and the invisible. And I'm really tripping on that. And when energy moves, it leaves perfect symmetry shapes, and so they are trying to photograph these shapes.
You, Monika, what are you reading now? You're reading Tokarczuk, I know.
Yeah, so I'm reading Flights by Olga Tokarczuk, and then I'm reading another book that actually just came out this week, translated from Polish, which is The King of Warsaw. And it's kind of about gangsters in 1930s Warsaw. It's translated by my friend Sean Bai. And basically it's the story of this young Jewish boy who witnesses his father being, his father is taken away by these gangsters because he owes them money. And then he kind of falls in with this member, or like, how do I say it? He's a guy who's like a boxer, but he also works for like the mafia, like the Jewish sect of like the mafia, or like some gangsters in 1930s Warsaw. And so he kind of learns this new underground life. And meanwhile, he's narrating this whole story from Israel, like years later. So it's kind of got this multi-layered feeling to it of him remembering being this like impressionable kid and being taken under the wing of like the most dangerous man in all of Warsaw. And these guys are also like beating up people who write like anti-Semitic things in the newspaper and kind of trying to like regain some power. So it's a really interesting, I've never heard that kind of, from that perspective, that like slice of history. So it's a really interesting novel, pretty dark, and I think it came out a number of years ago in Poland and is just kind of making its way here. I think actually it's published by Amazon Crossing, which is interesting. They do a whole set of like translated books. So
it's Amazon.
yeah,
that Amazon.
mm-hmm. They do a lot of
I couldn't pick just one thing, so I brought my stack because I didn't know what I would talk about.
Good, I want to see the stack.
But
wow.
it's aspirational. It's not, I'm not reading all of it. I brought the things that I'm reading now. You know, usually I like to read one book at a time and finish that book, but it's been harder to do that. So, so I have the things that I want to read and like that I pick up, and the things that I've tried to read and that I've abandoned or at least put down. But right now I'm reading two things. So I'm rereading, and I'm a little ashamed, I'm rereading The Stand by Stephen King, which was published in 1978. And this is a first edition, which I have, and has great artwork on the cover. But, you know, I read Stephen King when I was a teenager, and he was sort of a gateway drug for me for books. It's kind of how I came to reading. You know, he's sort of like junk food, and, you know, addictive and unputdownable. But I haven't read him or that book since high school, which for me was in the 1980s. And so I wanted something comforting to read, but at the same time, that book is not comforting. It's about a superflu epidemic that wipes out the population of most of the world. And then in the wake of that, it's very long and it's an epic book. But in the wake of that, there are people who have immunity who are left alive, and they form into factions, and there are two supernatural cult leaders. One is evil and one is good, and it's about the clash between these two factions in America after a pandemic. So I wanted to reread it because I wanted to see, like, from the perspective of 1970s America, what was still true today, what he got right about this current moment, and what is completely different about it. And, you know, it's genre fiction and it's just for entertainment, but it's prescient because now something like this is happening. And in some ways, this battle for good and evil, which is kind of metaphysical and is, you know, there's that strain in American culture and American politics too. But what's interesting is also the way the government is depicted in the book, but it shows a government that's extremely competent, and we don't have that right now. So that's the other one that I'll talk about is because that's a novel, it's long and it's dense, and I can't concentrate and just read it consistently straight through. I have to take breaks from it. And because, as I said, it's junk food, and spiritually I need more nourishment than that. In general, as a reader, and particularly now under quarantine when life is so different and I look to books for meaning. So I've also been reading poetry, which is not something I tend to read a lot of, but I do occasionally. And I just discovered this writer. She's Chilean. Her name is Gabriela Mistral. She won the Nobel Prize in the 1940s, and she was the first Latin American writer to win the Nobel. She was the mentor and teacher to Pablo Neruda, who's probably the most famous Chilean writer, who also won the Nobel Prize. He's globally famous, and I think his career kind of eclipsed hers, so that more people know about him than know about her.
Which is frequent.
What's that? Yeah, which is frequent, exactly. Yeah. But it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And, you know, for me, the decision to read poetry as a counterpoint to a novel like The Stand is because it's all about the language, it's compressed, and it's all about feeling and meaning. And I get more meaning and sustenance from one page of Mistral than I do from 800 pages of Stephen King. So I think of it as like the Stephen King is my daytime reading, and the Mistral is my nighttime reading before I go to sleep.
To try to turn off the plague thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, when you put it that way, I have another book here that I think might be interesting to just show you guys. This is more from my life as a literature grad student studying like literary theory and stuff, but it's this book by Lauren Berlant it's called Cruel Optimism, and it's about her conception of that term, which she kind of is using in the book, is that it's when something you want is actually an obstacle in your flourishing or your thriving. So you want something that's no longer really achievable, and the desire to get that is what's stopping you from actually like a different future. So I think maybe a good example of that is like being a millennial, and like your biggest dream is to own your own home, right? And that's so impossible that like just your desire to have that is like an obstacle for you to maybe have a different dream, right? So that has been a really interesting read right now, like the idea that optimism can be cruel, and the very thing you hope for could be the thing that is standing in your way. And I think it's unfortunately very relevant to a lot of what's going on now economically and otherwise, and healthcare wise and everything. So
yeah,
that's not my bedtime reading.
You're reading that with your class, Monika?
I am reading that for a paper I'm hoping to write, but not with my class. It's just something that has been on my shelf that I've been wanting to read, so trying to make use of it.
I wanted to say about the optimism, I can relate, not maybe with optimism, but with the whole thing of the good vibes that was so popular like a few years ago. Like, oh, good vibes only. And now I am so sick of the idea of good vibes, like,
Yeah.
like if you're in your early 20s and you talk about good vibes, is okay. But like if you talk about good vibes in your mid 20s or late 20s, I am sick of it. Like, no, it's not good vibes. It's like real vibes, because the real vibes sucks. So you have to keep with it.
But that's such a good connection, because this is about like, a desire to like be honest about what's possible, right? Like, so maybe a dream you had, it's also, she uses it in terms of like romantic relationships, stability, all of that. Like maybe that formulation worked at a certain point, but it doesn't work anymore now. And so continuing to desire it is like desiring something that's gone. So I think that's a good connection, because it's like,
And
what's the point of reaching for good vibes if the general vibes are very bad?
Exactly. And I was on the phone with this artist from LA, because I used to live in LA for a long time. And he asked me, why I came back to Italy. And I told him, like, the day after Donald Trump was elected, because I was living in California, it was a very weird feeling, because it was as if, from day to night, the American dream kind of disappeared, and you could see things as they really were, like as if the LSD effect was over, the American dream, fairy dust was over, and you could see things. And I started to see people like all running in the same direction, and all thinking, oh yeah, I'll be the next Kim Kardashian, or I'll be the next, millionaire. And in this process of running to the same dream, which is a fed up dream, not his own dream, you are the slave actually of the whole system, because you keep working for a dream that you will never actually reach. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, so I'm one of those too now, because you come to America and you have your pure dreams, like, oh, I'll be this and that. But then America is very good to feed you up with the dreams that are not your dreams, like become millionaire, become famous, become that, especially LA, of course.
Yeah.
And then, like, thank God I realized that. And I was in a Uber driver, and I saw all these people, like, LA traffic, right? So I saw all these people in the traffic, and I was like, oh my God, we're all actually soldiers, thinking we're reaching a dream that just the 1% of us will probably reach, but you spend your whole life actually wasting it for reaching a dream that is unreachable, so it kind of maybe is like that cruel optimism.
Isn't that's hearing Georgia talk about that? That reminds me or makes me think of American Pastoral, because isn't that
Yeah, exactly.
about? I mean, it's about the death of the American dream and the reaction, the political reaction to it.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And also made me think a lot about the generation of my parents, who, like my dad, for example, he was Italian and he was raised here just right after the revolutions in the 60s. So the generational gap that there was between my grandparents, who are also Italian, and him, it was so huge that it just created this vortex, this constant search for identity and for meaning in a country that was not Italy anymore. It was sort of like a hybrid of Italy but also America, because there was so much influence. We still have that generation of like my grandparents and baby boomers who are completely opposite of what we are. And it's actually in the Italian culture, it's kind of frowned upon if you are someone who wants to be successful and you want to be the entrepreneur and you want to be rich and have it all. It's sort of like, I don't want to stand out. Grandparents are thinking, why are you worrying? Like there's a war basically going on outside and you're worried about being productive.
To connect that, I guess, because Eric, you asked me about like my teaching and my students. From them, I get a very strong, like, I can feel their anxiety about still wanting to perform for my class and for school, and a lot of anxiety about like, I have to work. I have students who work essential jobs, like at a grocery store. I have students who are sick, whose family, you know, have different family situations. Their parents lost their job, all sorts of situations. And they are still like apologizing to me for not being like their best self. It's amazing. Like it's almost like it just is what you're saying, Virginia, like it's almost like our mental way of thinking about ourselves in the world and what's important has not shifted, even though the situation's completely changed.
Probably sounds like off topic because I'm not sure where I'm going with this. There was this TV show, which is The Big Brother, and there were people in it, because of course they were in it. And they were there like until last week. So for the 2 months of COVID, these people were inside this show and didn't know what was going on outside. Like, yeah, maybe once every 2 weeks they would give news, but not so much. And I honestly was thinking, you are putting these people, you don't allow these people to actually leave a situation that will never happen in their life again. You know, for the sake of the show must go on, you're actually depriving people of living and feeling a situation that they must feel this present in order to approach the future, right? And you are removing a piece of fundamental life and fundamental history, because we are living history, in order for the show to go on. And I was completely shocked about that. Like that they didn't say, listen, you know, it's happening an historic thing outside this house, and I need to witness because I need to feel the present and absorb all these informations. No, they decided to stay inside the house, the Big Brother house, and the show kept going. And to me, this was like mind-blowing. And even when I go in the balcony and I see, you know, the bus drivers, that's another level, because the bus driver is an essential job, so they have to work. And I see them and I think every morning at 6 a.m. they start the run and they finish around 9 p.m. And I see these guys, right? And I also think, like, they are not as lucky as us, which can be home and can completely absorb what's going on and feel feelings. Their routine has not changed.
What you describe, if I can say it, is almost like it's a fantastic premise for a novel, you know, and you think about creative work and, you know, just specifically I can imagine this is a scenario for a novel, this Big Brother thing going on, and the novelist would write about the lives and the dramas taking place within the Big Brother, you know, cone of silence, you know, what's going on there. And then parallel to that, you would have the people who produce the show and the conversations that they're having and the decisions that they have to make, knowing what's going on, while the people inside are ignorant of it, and like kind of have these things in parallel, and the ways they, you know, the ways they interact and connect with what's going on. I don't know. I mean, and you know, we're talking about literature, and undoubtedly there is going to be COVID literature. There's going to be a COVID novel, and you know, what is that going to be like? I mean, maybe something like that is too obvious in some ways. This experience that we're all having now is going to infuse the writing that comes out of this, and you know, how are we going to understand it through literature later?
I've been actually reading some cookbooks, and that has been the most relaxing reading, probably. It's just like the steps of how you make something.
Instructions.
And really great pictures of food, yeah.
Are you using new cookbooks, contemporary cookbooks, or classic ones? Do you?
Well, we have both of the Alison Roman cookbooks, which are really popular now here. So those are the ones I was just kind of like on a Saturday night laying on the couch and looking through and being like, oh, we could make some kind of like savory pie or something, and kind of just getting ideas for the 3 meals a day, 7 days a week we have to feed ourselves. Which I actually love. I've been having a great time cooking, but
honestly, like on this method of 3 times, I was at the phone with Giorgia and another friend of ours called Emma. And I don't know, but Emma said the most true thing I've heard, like in weeks probably, because we were saying, how are you? Like, how are things going? And she's like, hey, you know, like, I'm a bit tired of this shit. You have to cook and clean 3 times a day now. It's so true. Like,
I feel like a housewife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Me too.
Eric, I see you cooking on Instagram.
Yeah, I do. I'm one of those people that puts pictures of food and.
I do too.
So where are you going when you walk?
Oh, I've been taking what we're calling more like urban hikes. So I've walked from my house to Brighton Beach, which is like 5 miles each direction, so 10-mile walk. And then just yesterday we walked to what is it called? Mill Basin, which is near Jamaica Bay. So also like the very far end of Brooklyn. So 5 miles there and 5 miles back, and we pack a lunch. And it's just a way to feel like a Saturday went to some exercise and seeing parts of the city that you would never go to if you could just get around to the places you wanted or had to go. Though I have to say I love Brighton Beach. It's one of my favorite places. But it was so nice to see the ocean. Like, just there's barely anyone there. There's like one old man swimming, which is.
We talk about this weird choreography or this weird dance when you're walking down, whether you're walking down the sidewalk or you're walking on a path in the park. You know, that moment where you're coming towards somebody and you're trying to navigate or negotiate who's going to move where, and some people are less concerned about it and some people are more, and what's the etiquette around that. So we're all trying to figure that out. So all of that is strange, and it's the kind of thing that feels like it's not going to go away anytime soon, even when things begin to quote unquote normalize. But I go in on walks in the park, and it's what passes for nature here in the city, and it's a little quiet time, and it's a way to get away from the house, and I don't know, it's peaceful and nice, but also sad. And you know, we have because we can go out, but we shouldn't go out, and we're urged not to go out, and it's a question of social responsibility to stay home. I feel guilty if I go out, but I got to get out, you know?
Yeah.
So how do you?
It's I mean, I go on a walk almost every day. I just think that I don't know how I would function if I didn't. But there's like an interesting ballet, especially because, you know, everything's, even I live in like a fairly like residential neighborhood. There are houses here because it's like pretty deep in Brooklyn. The sidewalks are really skinny, so there's this whole ballet of like I walk across somebody's like front yard, or like you go into the street to like respectfully avoid people, you know, as much for their benefit as mine. I'm not really afraid of people. I don't feel that way. I just like, I more like assume they're afraid of me. So I try to, you know, like let people pass or do all that. And you know, I think for me the most stark thing is like the grocery store. Like there's a whole, like, you have to psych yourself up to go to the store, and then there's honestly in our neighborhood to go to like the store that has nice vegetables or whatever, there's a 2-hour wait in line, with a mask on. People have gloves, they have all sorts of like, you know, homemade whatever protective gear on, and then you go to the store and you like can't reach for something, you like are like, oh sorry, like you go ahead. And there's a whole like social negotiation happening, that's like,
Yeah.
I mean, good, but also like so weird and like a little disconcerting that like everyone's afraid of each other. I think that's really like necessary but sad.
So I'm trying always to zigzag around them, and they just don't care.
2 weeks ago, there was a scene that stuck in my mind. So there was this old man, right, with this old dog in the park, because there is the park in front of my balcony, so I can see all these scenes, you know. And there was this old man like walking the dog, and you could see he wanted to like talk and socialize with probably this girl who was also walking the dog. And the girl was like so rude to him, like I guess to protect him. But she was like, can you go away from me? Can you leave? Like, because he was coming closer to the 2 meters dancing with no mask, nothing. So she was like, you have to go away. You have to stay far from me. And to watch that, and then you see this guy turning back and walking alone back home, you know. And it was breaking for me, because you think, what kind of paradox we are in? Like, to protect their life, we're actually making them die alone, because these people don't care if they can live 3 more months or next year. Like, they're probably gonna die like very old people. They have limited amount of time, and we are leaving them alone for maybe the last month of their life. You don't know if it's gonna be the last month of their life, or if next year is gonna be the last year of their life. But the fact that we are like, to protect life, we came to the point that we have to stop living, and to protect the old people, we're making the old people die alone. Like, it's so many paradoxes that you think, okay, we are in the wrong way, like our society is moving the wrong direction, and you know, we have to do something, because we are living in paradoxes that make us understand in which kind of unbearable cycle we are living in, right? So
on my various walks, I've seen a lot of like older people like leaning out of their windows talking to you know, people passing by on the street, or like, you know, their neighbor or something. And or like people will stand on their own lawns and talk to each other. I see a lot of that in this part of Brooklyn. So it's also interesting to see though how people are adapting and are making sure, like, you know, people who are older or whatever, or, you know, aren't alone. You know, I know my parents and my sister like stood on opposite sides of, she has a big backyard, and just like yelled at each other across the yard or whatever. And that's like the best you can do, right, in this situation, I guess. I don't know. It's sad to think though, like, I don't know when's the next time. I don't, probably some of you all are in the same situation. Like, I don't know, my parents are like getting older, and I don't know when the next time I get to see them is. And it's like, it's really, I mean, they don't live far, they live in Philadelphia, but I can't go see them. I'm not going to come from the center of the crisis to go see my 70-year-old parents. So
Yeah, I mean, same. My parents are in their early 80s, and I have my father and stepmother in California, and so I talk to them. I don't know when I'll see them again. And my mother and stepfather are here in the Bronx, in the North Bronx, um, and they're all taking it seriously, but they're still going out to the grocery store, which they need to do, but they're going out more than I feel comfortable knowing that they're doing. Uh,
Yeah.
I know they take precautions and they're careful, but my mother and stepfather in particular are kind of frail and seem to me to be at risk. And so it makes me nervous. Giorgia, you talk about maybe they've been through a lot, Georgia, you said, and maybe they're conscious or aware of this being the last time that they have, or a late time for them. And I also think that it's hard for them to adapt. It's harder for them to adapt and do things differently than they had done. Personally
Yeah.
speaking, my mother, I know she's extremely stubborn and just have her doesn't like to break her routine or have her pattern changed. And talking to friends, who have parents out of the state in maybe more Republican or red states who maybe take it a little less seriously, and how frustrating that is for my friends.
Very stressful. Yeah. I know a lot of people in that situation.
But Georgia, you talked about the paradox, and I feel like that really is the special tone or quality of this moment and this pandemic. That is, I mean, there's the disease and the ways in which society is adapting to deal with it and hopefully cure it, develop a vaccine and finish it. But we're all in confrontation now with this paradox, and I don't know, I guess I wanted to ask you, like, that's the special texture of what it means to be in quarantine and what it means to live during the time of Corona. It's that, like that book Blindness is about a mysterious disease where people, and I haven't read it, but people, get it and they go blind, and how the community deals with that. And if you were to treat this in fiction, that's what you would really want to get at or try to capture, is that feeling of isolation in order to preserve life, and how much of a contradiction or a paradox that is, because it is deprivation. So are you hopeful and optimistic, Georgia, when you talk about going back? Like, do you see like deep meaningful change emerging from this, or do you think that once it's done we'll just go back to the way things were?
Well, I would love to hope and be positive, but also like seeing the urge and the speed to which people want to go back to normality makes me not be so positive and optimistic about the future. Because like if I look at China, which is ahead of all of us in this, they got back to normality, or they're trying to force it back without changing any rule about wild animals, or without what's disappointing to me is that the top politicians or people at the top, they are not talking about the causes of COVID. They are just talking about COVID as if COVID was the enemy, but the enemy is not COVID. The enemy is what caused COVID. And we're not attacking the right enemy. Like, we're fighting a war against the wrong enemy, because like COVID is actually, I'm not saying an ally, but COVID is actually one thing that allowed the whole global system to stop and rethink and save itself before it was too late, like ecologically wise, sustainability wise. Like COVID was able to do what nothing I was ever been able to do, like stop everything and everyone, like globally, economically, financially, anything. Like COVID did something that no war, no God, nothing did, right? So I'm not saying, oh, thank God we had COVID. No, of course not. But since we had it, we could have used it differently. We could have used this break and this pause in a whole different way. And the fact that nobody's talking about it, like at the beginning I was very optimistic about it, but now I'm not, because everything is going to be forced back into normality. But I think actually this enemy that we have, like COVID, is actually very smart. Like, and I'm a bit happy about it, because it actually forces you, like even the fact that it sticks to pollution, like it keeps proving that it goes to touch all these problematic that we were living in. Like it sticks to pollution, it's invisible because I can have it and spread it. Like it's not like Ebola, which if I had it, I was so sick, I would not spread it to anybody. You know, COVID is targeting all our weaknesses as humans. And I like that. So, because, you know, it's saying, hey, this is your weakness. Hey, you cut money to hospital. This is your weakness. Hey, you are polluting the earth. This is your weakness. You're not protecting wild animals. This is a problem. You're doing deforestation. That's a problem. You're doing, you know, huge animal farming. That's a problem. And it's highlighting all these problems, and we still think that he is the enemy and not all these problems. I'm like, okay, so we're not gonna save ourselves, you know. We are like in a huge machine that was going to hit a wall because we were going so fast and so productive and so like not caring about anything, and we were about to hit a wall, right? And COVID kind of stopped us just right before the hit. I'm saying like future generations could not survive this planet as we were doing it, right? And we stopped just right before the wall, and we're trying to understand what stopped us. We're not seeing that we were about to hit the wall, you know, and we can't wait to go back and drive at the same speed. I'm like, okay, so we're done. You know, this was the greatest opportunity humanity had to actually stop and do something. And in history books, it will probably be remembered as the one time humanity wasted a huge opportunity, the unique opportunity we had to save future generations, you know. And that's like, I'm a bit frustrated by this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's a spot on analysis of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to add. That's perfectly said.
Giorgia, I don't know if you feel that too or not.
Oh, I do agree with you. I feel like I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope in people, and especially in young people. I think that we can learn something from this, and I think we should have hope in believing that we can contribute to a better society. Also, I disagree with the fact that we have to, the whole weight of change has to be on our shoulders. I don't think that we have to pressure ourselves into doing this fight, because it's a big fight, and we need to be open, and we need to be engaged with people who might have more power than us at the same time. So I think this will lead us to have conversation with parties that may not come from our same backgrounds, and they may not have our same objectives, but I think with this conversation, it's a good starting point, because like for most of the people who are locked in quarantine, we're all thinking like, oh, what can we do to change? What can we, where should we focus on? But at the same time, there are people, like probably like a 1% of the world population, who have the power to change, and they're not asking the questions themselves. Mm-hmm. What they're doing is that they're trying to see how they can exploit this opportunity into the most profitable way they can. And that their actions, the things that are happening right now, is what is going to build the architecture of the society that we're going to have to live in. So it's very stressful to be inside and knowing that this is happening on the outside. But also I try to tell myself that I'm doing as much as I can. And I know that if I rest, it's kind of like a marathon. Like you can't be expecting to run 20 Ks every day. You have to have a rest day. You have to have a day where your muscles recover. And I think this is a good time to recover because we're going to have to like do a lot of stuff when we get out.
I agree with that. And I would also say, to go back to our question about like what literature is going to come out of this time, like I'm more interested in what you said about like, this is a time to like rest, think, do some like, you know, when we're not panicking, do some like deep thinking about the world that's and the society that's going to come out on the other side. And that's not necessarily like always an active thing, right? It's not necessarily like doing actions or like producing some kind of COVID novel or something. It's more like thinking about like what the future is going to hold for, you know, for people and for literature and how we can begin to kind of just like form our thoughts about that, and rather than like trying to like, I think there's a lot of focus still on like immediately trying to produce something, return to normal, create a solution, do something. And of course, in terms of like the science, like a vaccine, of course, it's extremely urgent. But I think in terms of like thinking or writing or making art, like that's a much longer term process. And that was my only like kind of caveat before about like resisting the urge to like immediately produce something out of experience.
To add anything or suggest maybe a book?
I would like to suggest a book. I've got it here actually. It's in Italian. I don't know if it's been translated to English. It's called L'Isola di Arturo, The Island of Arthur by Elsa Morante.
Nice.
And she was an Italian writer, and all of us Italians have read it. I mean, I've studied it. And it's basically the story about a little boy who was raised in an island off the coast of Naples. And he's never left the island. He's just kind of like a Robinson Crusoe type of kid. And it's a novel of him growing up to become a man while he lives and mourns for his father, who goes to Naples every so forth. But it's a beautiful novel, and I think it inspired Elena Ferrante's novels as well.
You know what? I even have it here and I talked about it before, but I'll just suggest Flights because I'll represent Polish literature. And also the other thing about it that I think might be interesting to read now is that it's in very short sections that are kind of interwoven stories. So, you know, if you don't have hours to sit down with a novel, like you can just read a fragment and have it start your day or end your day.
I don't know. I was thinking about it, and you know, I have my pile. I'll say a couple of things quick. I have my pile, and it's comprised of books also that I haven't read that I've been flirting with and thinking about picking up next. And like, what's it going to be? Which one is it going to be? So I think it's going to be maybe one of these two, and maybe you guys have read the books or the authors. But I've Marguerite Duras, French writer, mid-century French writer, The Sailor from Gibraltar, and The Unconsoled by Ishiguro, Kazuo Ishiguro, English-Japanese writer. But the book that I would recommend, and it just occurs to me also because there's a New York-Italy connection, and it's one of my favorite books, as Monika knows, is The Flamethrowers by Rachel Kushner. And it's a novel that takes place in New York and Italy in the 1970s. The main character is an artist, and she is kind of negotiating the art world in Soho in the 1970s.
Thank you so much, guys. It was very nice spending this hour with you.
Thank you so much for bringing us together.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of the day, especially New York. Me and Virginia are about to cook dinner and clean.
Again.